that percentage, whatever percentage, then ends up in trouble with the law. So,
okay. So I've got a couple of people on probation.
Okay, for their gambling.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we got people dialing in. So some of you guys, it just says caller 2, caller 5, caller 7 without names. So hang on, let me see if if you're wanting to remain anonymous. Caller 02, okay. All right, so Greta, do you are you seeing a list of the callers?
Yeah, I am. I think sometimes the callers are connected to people whose names are up there. They're just on the phone instead of on a web-based headset.
Oh, okay. All right, gotcha.
And I hit the record button, so you're recording.
Okay. So I'm throwing this out just as just kind of an educational piece. So I was in Chicago, I don't know, I think 3 weeks ago, testifying at a federal sentencing hearing. I think some of you heard me say that I've been involved so far in 50 to 60 cases in both state and federal court, all the most recent cases in federal court with gamblers who crossed the line into illegal activity. And this is all public domain information that I'm telling you. I'm not giving you names, but somebody could go look it up if they wanted to. But the last individual that I testified for robbed 5 banks. And this may be a little bit different kind of gambler than what you all are dealing with out there. He got in trouble with loan sharks at the off-track betting parlors, which I'm not sure if there are any of those in Oregon or not. Are there, Dick? Any of you guys?
I've not seen it.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know, off-track betting parlor is simply a place that people can go and they watch the races on TV and can place bets in that location. And he got in trouble, and in those places, there are plenty of people there who are financial predators, for lack of a better term, who look for a chump like him. And so he ended up owing them a lot of money. And it's been one of the rare cases in the last 30 years where I've had somebody who's actually been roughed up by somebody that they owed money to, which happens more with loan sharks. Bookies don't usually do that. Now, in the old days when it was all mob run in the Chicago area and I guess New York and around other places, then people would get roughed up. But it really doesn't happen much in this time. So he ended up robbing 5 banks. And this guy had worked at banks, and he knew what he needed to write in a note, what he needed to say. And so it's interesting that he ended up getting, for robbing 5 banks, he ended up getting sentenced for 41 months, which was a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is go in at the sentencing phase and I do an evaluation and answer really 3 questions. And that is this person does he meet diagnostic criteria for or criteria for diagnosis of gambling addiction? And usually that's, by the time you've done this for a little bit, you don't have to fill out the forms and paperwork and look at the diagnostic criteria in order to know. But when I'm doing a formal report, I go through, I do use the South Oaks gambling screen simply to collect information and use to say, yeah, I run this, here's what they scored. But I use the 20 questions out of Gamblers Anonymous, this is the combo book. A lot of you are aware of this. If you're not, this is used in every GA meeting. And in the back of that, there's the last 2 pages, there's 20 questions. And usually when somebody goes into a GA meeting in most parts of the country, they'll, instead of immediately letting you in the meeting, this is a little bit different about Gamblers Anonymous than, say, AA in all the places I'm aware of, is that typically they don't let you into a Gamblers Anonymous meeting without qualifying you first, and that typically means going through the 20 questions and have somebody answer yes or no to the 20 questions. And it says if somebody answers yes to 7 or more, then you're a probable pathological gambler and you can come in. And the reason they did that in the early days was because virtually all the gambling was illegal. And the people gamblers who would have owed money to were of the unsavory character sort. And so they wanted to make sure that the meetings were a place that were safe and protected from people who might be wandering in the meetings to try and collect information. So, but what I use is the 20 questions, and what I ask them to do is, and actually you guys can do this too, that I think is beneficial in any treatment process. Instead of writing yes or no answer to the question, have them write out a paragraph response to that. That'll give you a lot more information to get in their head to find out what they're thinking or what they're not thinking than simply a yes or no answer. So it's a really valuable tool for diagnosis assessment. For example, I mean, just question number 4. Some of you are real aware of these, but number 4 says, have you ever felt remorse after gambling? If you get a yes answer to that, that really doesn't tell you anything, does it? But a paragraph will open the door to all kinds of data, if you will, that you can use. So just a tidbit. So anyway, I use that. What I've also been doing is and I think this is really significant for us in the field, and I'm guessing, I'm sure hopefully you guys are aware of this, is the move of gambling addiction in DSM-4 and DSM-5 from the original diagnostic category of impulse control disorders. So they put those of us with gambling problems in the same category as the fire starters and the hair pullers. Impulse control disorder, moved it in DSM-5 to what's the official title? Substance use disorders. Mm-hmm. Substance and other use disorder, whatever the official title is. And what it says in there is that one of the reasons for the move is all the current research, all the current brain research showing the similarities between gambling addiction, and it's the only non-substance use disorder that's in that category so far, but all the brain research showing the similarities. So if you know, and in most states, I'm sure Oregon does, have programs for substance abusers that are something along the lines of treatment alternatives to sentencing. Mm-hmm. Right? In Illinois, it's called the TASK program. And so in effect, the judge says, well, I give you a choice. You can go to treatment or you can go to jail. Which one do you want?
Here it's called the SB 416 program.
SB 416? Okay. So in the federal system doesn't really have anything like that necessarily, but what they do have in the federal system is a treatment program that I believe is 18 months long, that if somebody has a substance abuse problem, is diagnosed with that and pass the screening once they get into the Bureau of Prisons, then if they get into that program, they stay in the program, and they successfully complete the program, it can cut at least 12 months off of a sentence, and then you can even get out earlier and go to a halfway house or go on home monitoring, that sort of thing. And so the federal system has acknowledged that treatment for addiction, substance use does work. So what I've been using then, and the benefit of the criteria of gambling at the same level as substance use disorders, is that the federal system fully understands the treatment necessity and benefit for people who are being sentenced for substance use problems, but they haven't made that connection yet with gambling. So what the DSM-5 has done is put a tool in our hands, those of us who are involved with the legal system, to say, all right, substance use, now all the new criteria is saying this gambling is at the same level. And so I think that we get to use that as a way of making some difference to help these sick people get well or get some help within the federal system, with the caveat that there still isn't any treatment program for gambling. So I'm telling you that because this particular individual is being sentenced. And, you know, one of the things that I tell people, and hear this in the spirit that it's given, is look, you know, and I say this kind of tongue in cheek, we got somebody's got some music going in the background. Is that me? I don't think it's me. Okay. Somebody check your sources. There's some like musical screensaver or something in the background. Everybody else hear that too?
I do.
Yeah, we can't hear that.
Okay.
Showing up as caller number 2, whoever that is where that source is coming from.
Caller number 2?
And that's what keeps popping up.
Okay, yeah, I'm not getting that. We don't know, and we don't know who caller number 2 is. Ashley, are you there? Sousa, are you there? Brandy, you there? Hello?
Andy's here.
Okay. Danielle, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Raul,
Yeah, I'm here.
Rika.
You hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. Trent, Willie.
Yes, sir.
Okay, where the heck is this coming from? Hang on one second. Let me turn off my mic. No, I'm not going to do that.
I always wanted a soundtrack to my life.
Chris, are you able to mute everybody but you?
I might be able to, but I don't know. I don't know how to do that without. Where would that be coming from? Sounds like something I've heard before, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like on hold music. It sounds like hold music for sure.
Okay.
Different music from.
Okay, on my computer I had Safari open. Close that. Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from, guys.
Chris, do you have the GoToMeeting thing open on the side of your computer?
Yeah.
So I'm showing that because anytime when nobody else is talking, the music it keeps popping up. Caller number 2 is a person that has music playing from their.
Yeah. So what I've got a lot of people's names, and then there's a caller number 2. Let me if I hit there. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, I just muted them.
Yep.
Okay. So whoever caller number 2 is, if you start talking and nobody's responding, that may be you. Okay, got it. All right.
Put their heads.
All right. So,
Chris,
yeah, go ahead.
that program that you're talking about from the Fed program, it's called the RDAP program.
You're right. Exactly.
Yeah, I work 1 day a week in a Fed program here, providing mental health and dual diagnosis treatment to people that are coming out of BOP.
Okay. Coming out of BOP?
Yeah, they're either on pretrial or on BOP. So I work 30 hours a week as the gambling clinician for LifeWorks, and then I work 10 hours a week working in the Fed program that we have.
Okay. The question and the issue with this guy was, I said, look, you know, you're going to have to find a way of talking your way into the program. I said, you're an addict just like anybody else. The whole reason you're in prison is because of your addiction, just like everybody else in that program. And so, you know, my message to him was, look, dude, use your street smarts to figure out a way of talking your way into the program. So anyway, just I think a bit of an aside, but a relevant aside, to know that one of these days you may be working with somebody or get a call from somebody who has crossed the line into illegal activity and is being prosecuted. And if you need some help with that, feel free to give me a call. But there's really three parts to this, and I started saying this and I sidetracked myself. Number one, do they meet criteria for a diagnosis? And that's pretty easy. Number two, what if any is the connection between their gambling and their illegal activity? And that's where it can be either really clean or really muddy. It's real, and what I mean by that is it's real clean if you can trace that almost most or all of the money that was stolen went directly for gambling. And now if they're using some of the money to pay their rent because their rent money went to gambling, then it's in effect one step removed. And yet you can still say that that money went for gambling. You know, if they hadn't gambled away their rent money, they'd had it, but they got to pay their rent. Right, you get the principle there. The place where it gets really muddy is if this person is also, maybe they're losing money gambling, but they're maybe using it to buy a new car or take trips or that sort of thing. So the distinction that we're making, is this person a thief who may also have a gambling problem? Or is this person an addict, a compulsive or disordered gambler, whatever we're calling it these days, who committed the illegal acts in the progression of their addiction? So that's the other thing, the other two pieces that I look at. And I use extensively Henry Lessier's work. That's L-E-S-I-E-U-R. Henry was out in Oregon with me years ago. Were any of you at that, Dick? I know you were there years ago. I can't remember. I think we were in Portland or something. But Henry was probably the top researcher in the field. He's retired now. Wrote a book called The Chase. And in the book called The Chase, Henry describes something called the spiral of options, which I always include in my reports. And that's what we look for. And it goes like this. First, we go through our own money. Then we go through a borrowed money. And then we cross the line and steal money. That's the progression. And it doesn't mean that it's always linear, because if you're working, you're going to be making some of your own money. But we look for that progression also in the process of this. That's called the spiral of options. So part of it is answering the question, is this person a thief who also gambles? Then and I don't know that I've really had any of those cases. Or maybe I have. I've been consulted or called by attorneys, and I haven't taken the cases. But they all of them fit a pattern, is that these people they crossed the line into illegal activity in the progression of their addiction. And then the other critical component when you're going in front of a judge is, what have they done to acknowledge that they have a problem, and what kind of help have they received? I remember years ago in Illinois, this was in state court, there was a woman who said, well, I suggested, it might not be a bad idea for you to go to some Gamblers Anonymous meetings. And I don't tell anybody they have to do that. It's your life. It's your choice. And she said, well, I'm going to wait to see what the judge says. And I said, I'll take it for what it's worth, but I think I can tell you what the judge is going to say if you'd like to hear it. No, I'm going to wait and see what the judge says. Okay. And sure enough, the judge says, well, what have you done to address your problem? Well, I was going to wait till this woman was not real smart. She said, well, I was going to wait till I heard what you said. And the judge says, well, here's what I've got to tell you, is that I'm going to sentence you to 5 years in prison. But it possibly would have been probation had you taken responsibility before you got in here, said, I got a problem, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to correct the problem. But because you didn't do that, then you're going to jail. And she looked pretty surprised at that point. So anyway, that's always interesting to be involved in a sentencing in federal court. Part of what happened, the tellers at let me tell you two other pieces that are connected to this. This guy's in Chicago, and he joined the Wednesday night group that I do, that I've had going for many, many years. And it's interesting because in that group, one of the guys is a banker. He was a very well-known banker. And what he helped my guy connect with is that what he did, in fact, was commit an act of violence in his desire to not hurt anyone. And I believe his intent was to not hurt anyone. What he did, in fact, was commit an act of violence against the tellers because they didn't know whether he was a credible threat or not. And the power of this group helping this guy connect with the reality that he committed of act of violence helped him move from his head down to his heart, so that when he stood in front of a judge, that's what he talked about. He said, I never, in the midst of this, I didn't want to hurt anybody, but what I connect with is, in fact, that, and the teller, two of the tellers, by the way, came to the sentencing hearing and actually testified. He said, I'm really connecting in a way that I didn't, that I committed an act of violence. And he was speaking from the heart, not up here. And he said also what I saw in one of the videos, that when the police came to the site of one of my robberies, that they went up on the sidewalk and I saw an older person on a bicycle that they could have hit and hurt them. So he did a really admirable job of connecting down in his guts what the consequences of his actions were, which resulted in a much lower sentence. So, these are all just pieces of dealing with the consequences of one's actions. I've got a guy who robbed 9 banks that the sentencing was supposed to be a couple of weeks ago, and they moved it to January. He's been sitting in federal lockup in downtown Chicago for the last 3 years, I believe. So that's part of what's been going on with me with respect to gambling. I'll tell you, give you one more update, and this is relevant to you guys. I get a call from a woman at, I don't know, maybe 10:30 this morning, and it was a local number here in Austin, and she said, well, I found you on the internet, and I've got a son who's got a gambling problem, and before I write a check for $6,800, I told him that I was going to talk to somebody. I said, okay. And so he turns out he's in school here at UT. He's been playing in the illegal card rooms, and he proclaims that he's a great gambler, but he owes $6,800 to people at the card room. So I said, well, I said he's not that great for several reasons. One is that he's involved in a game where there's always people there who are ready to pick his pockets. And number one, he's gambling with money that he doesn't have. But the biggest problem right now, and this is what I said to her, is he's got a mom who's willing to take on the responsibility of his pain and his consequences that he needs to have in order to get well. So you can do that, but I can guarantee you all you're doing is perpetuating the problem. So I'm telling you this because, and no doubt I'm guessing you all get calls like this, and if you don't, you will. So I went on to say, here's the biggest problem in my experience with adolescent gamblers, is that they don't have any pain. So he said, well, he's depressed, and he's on ADD medication and seeing a psychiatrist, and I said, well, I don't know that he experiences any of that as a consequence of his gambling. In fact, I'm sure that he doesn't, because who's bearing the consequences of his gambling? Well, you are. So the question is, and that's typical of most adolescents, like some of us who are older and, lost families or our sanity or licensed to practice our profession or whatever it happens to be. How do you help an addict who doesn't have the benefit of the pain of the consequences of their addiction, which is greater than that level of denial or the action, whatever it happens to be? So I'm asking myself that question for you guys because it's a very relevant question. And my answer to that is, ultimately, I don't know. But where that leaves me, though, is with an intervention that is under the heading of, for lack of a better term, education. So what I told this mom was, I said, look, I said, since you're calling me and asking me, I'll shoot straight with you. What I would suggest that you tell him is, yes, I will help you. Of course, what he believes then is you're going to write him a big old fat check. Yes, I'll help you, but before I do, I said, you're not telling him what the nature of the help is that you're giving him. Yes, I will, but before we do that, I want you to come with me to see somebody. And so she called me a little while ago and said they're coming in on Thursday. Now, what I do with somebody like that is simply ask them, as you guys have heard me do, ask him to tell me his story. And what I will do is listen for all the incongruence, all the inconsistencies, all the deleted pieces of information, and invite him to fill them in. And so my goal with somebody like that, whether I'm successful or not, is to help him become conscious of his choices. Another way of saying, to interrupt his lies to himself. All right, let me pause for a second and take a breath and let you guys respond to that. Anybody? Do I have everybody muted?
Nope.
Okay.
Dick.
I was going to say, so in that you're inviting them into their incongruity.
Yeah, which is as I listen to that, is kind of a vague. What I'm listening for. Let me see if I can be clear about that, Dick. What I'm actually, I'm seeing. Can you all see me okay, or am I kind of dark here?
Kind of dark.
Let me do. Hang on. Okay, that might be a little bit better. What we know is that when we're gambling, we're lying to ourselves. And the lies are in the form, they're not necessarily overt lies, but they're in the form of half-truths. For example, I know just by experience what I'm going to hear from him is something along the lines of you know what, I know what I did wrong last time, and you know, I've figured out, or I've modified my system, and I know that I can go back in there and do it different next time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's true, but it's not the whole story. So what we do with that is, and by the way, this is not somebody who's asking for help for their gambling problems. So where would he be in terms of the stages of change model?
Pre-con.
Yeah, pre-contemplation. I want to help him move from pre-contemplation to screwed up. You know, it's like that old thing, I may not, you know, you may not stop drinking, but will damn sure screw it up for you. So that's what I want to do, is find a way to get in his head and rattle around, knowing that there probably isn't much that I can do to help him stop gambling. What I can do is interrupt mom's need to step in and bail him out. And I asked her, I said, are you scared? She says, yeah, he's been roughed up. I said, is that what he told you? She said, yes. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I will tell you, with many adolescents, sports betting, cars, or whatever, what they learn early on, that an easy way of getting money out of mom and dad is to let them know that people are threatening them. All right, so that's so you watch it, and that may or may not be true. If it is true, I've got some friends in the FBI that I've consulted with before, that it's easy for me to pick up the phone and, make a call and, ask for some help if I need to. I think we've done that on 1 or 2 occasions in the past. So what I want to do is get in his head, and whatever he says, I want to have him finish the story. Finishing the story simply means instead of he'll tell me what he's going to do next time. What I want to do is go back and ask him to tell me the story about how he got into trouble, how he ended up owing people as a college student with probably little or no money. In fact, he's working to make his way. How he ended up owing other people $6,800, actually $6,800 as a result of his gambling. And I'm going to listen to what he says, and I'm going to ask him questions to fill in the blanks that he's leaving in what he says. How did this happen? And what I'm going to be listening for is if he uses a language of ownership or a language of detachment. Language of detachment as well. This happened or that happened. No, it's the language of victim. When he uses the language of victim, which is, this happened to me, or this guy did this, or they did that, or I'm going to invite him in whatever way I can to take ownership of responsibility for himself. What were the decisions that you made? And the goal is to help him get to a place of taking ownership for every single choice that he made, and to be conscious of every single choice that he made. And usually a leading question is, how did you decide to? How did you decide to? How did you decide to? And then what? And then what? And then what? And then what? And if you follow that protocol without knowing where it's going to take you, then you'll hear the places that he's lying to himself. You'll hear how that happens, and try to demonstrate that a few times when I've been out in Oregon, and how you interview people, because I don't know what the truth is. What I do know is that he's not telling himself the whole truth, because unless you don't end up, first of all, you don't have a gamble. If you're gambling with money that you don't have, you got a problem. Would you all accept that premise?
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
And then if you're in a place where you believe that you're hot stuff, and you got people there, quote, sponsor. I mean, that's the other thing that happens, is they find people to sponsor them. Well, what that means is, I'm going to front you money, and if you win, get this, how's this for a scam? Is you're a young poker player, you come into the card room, and I see that maybe you know a little bit about the game, but also you know enough to be taken advantage of. So I'm going to say, I'll tell you what, I'll sponsor you. So I'll front you the money, and you win, you and I split the winnings. And I either may or may not tell you that if you lose, you're going to owe me 100% of the money. So what kind of deal is that? So I front you the money, and if you win, you only get to keep 50 cents on the dollar, if that's what the deal is. And if you lose, you owe me 100 cents on the dollar. Well, the gambler in the fantasy world says, okay, that's cool, because I don't have to have any of my own money. I can play the game and I can win, right? You live in the fantasy of winning, which means that what you're not telling yourself is, well, yeah, but when you lose, then what? So that's what I mean by the half-truth, because we can place the next bet and win. All right, let me pause there. Any reflections, any questions? All right.
Chris, I think one thing, just speaking from our caseload here, and I don't know how this is reflected throughout the state. This is what you're talking about is really an action gambler scenario, and I just know from my caseload, I think I have one action gambler on my entire caseload, and I suspect throughout the rest of the state, just due to the way Oregon is structured, we're not coming up against that so much because it's really more the machine gambling.
Right, and what I would say is that's both true, and it's not a half truth. It's maybe an 80% truth, and that's a function of who you're seeing. The reality is that in Oregon there are a lot of high school and college students and young adults who are playing cards online, betting sports online, and I think the reality is you're just not seeing them. Would you all accept that?
Considering my, yeah, because my caseload is over. I don't think I have one person under the age of 45. So yes, I would concur with that. We're probably just not seeing it.
Yeah. So that means that there's a whole population out there that that is not being simply not presenting for treatment, and I don't know how you get past that.
Right. Yeah. With my caseload, I've noticed that the younger they are, the more the action gambler they are. And I've seen the legal issue side come up with a couple of them, but especially on the male side, I find that, in my caseload, those younger 20 age, low 20s, that's what they're running into is a lot of that. Like you said, there's probably been a sponsor writing a lot of bad checks, things like that, because you tend to come up with that age group because there's kind of that lack of responsibilities that they tend to hold on to from that side that I run into a lot.
Right.
I had one client like that, and he was really hard to hang on to.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So with that, what I'm talking about, yes, there's the difference, and then again, there's not the difference, because even with let's say the escape gambler, the person who's addicted to the machines, and by the way, the availability of the gambling determines the type of gambling problems you're going to run into, right?
Right.
So the same interviewing technique, if you will, is relevant for the machine gamblers.
Okay.
As it is for the action gamblers, in my experience. What you're going to get to, though, what you're going to add into that, though, is you have the luxury, if you got someone who's an older gambler, what you've got is the probability in that their gambling, and we've talked about this before, is connected to loss.
Right.
And you get it, or maybe they gambled in a way that wasn't problematic for a while and crossed the line. So now in this case I was telling you about, this is let me tell you a couple pieces about this. That is, his mother told me that his grandfather was, and she used this term, assassinated in another part of the country. I don't know how many years ago, because of his gambling problem. So what we have, and what's relevant in this case to all our others, is we've got generational trauma that gets passed down, and we also know that sometimes this craziness skips generations, and so there's the deeper question of, to what extent, is he caught up in and at a level that is kind of in the realm of mystery, if you will. To what degree is he trying to fix something that was broken in a prior generation? And those of you who've been around for a while, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who are new in the field may not, but I'm telling you, there's crazy stuff that happens with generation skipping of trauma, and how that gets acted out and how that gets reenacted. So maybe that's something for another time, but there is traumatic loss, and his mother and father are divorced. So then sooner or later, I imagine with this young man, if to the extent that mother retains her leverage over him, and to however long he and I see each other, we're going to go there pretty quick. So so with the machine gamblers, what we were on a roll over to in this, and we've talked about this last time, if that's okay, is the hole in the mountain, which is the slide on your screen. Now, and I'm aware that a lot of you don't have a screen up, so you can't see it. Is Bridgeway? Are you guys the only ones on video then? Okay.
You do have your whiteboard behind you.
I do, yeah, but if nobody's got their video on, you all are the only one that can see that.
That won't work. Right.
All right, so let me check in with some of you who are remote. Brandy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I was just checking. Danielle, is it Danielle?
It's Danelle, and yes, I'm here.
Danelle.
And I can see your screen.
Oh, you can see the screen. Okay.
Yes.
Raul, are you there? Trent?
Yes, I'm here, and I can see your screen.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, so that's interesting. This doesn't tell me who can see the screen. Okay.
I think everyone can see the screen.
You
Yeah.
can see the screen.
Is there anybody who's listening in who can't see the screen? Anybody?
Yes, this is Amanda with the ARC.
Okay,
I don't
Amanda,
see the screen.
you can't see the screen. Amanda, did you get, were you on last time?
Yes.
Okay, did you get a copy of the slides that we sent out?
I probably did. Yeah, I don't have them up though.
Okay.
I'll look through my emails.
Okay, yeah, check. I think Greta sent those out after the last time. But
You did.
okay. So basically the hole in the mountain is relevant. Actually, I had a guy in here right before we met that we talked about this, and it's a real, to me, it's a foundational process. And by the way, the guy I saw earlier was not a gambler. He had a spending problem, but also he'd gotten in trouble with some real estate deals because he would buy the next deal with the fantasy that he was going to use the next deal to bail him out from the previous deal. And so what the hole in the mountain simply is about is this pattern of digging a hole and then climbing out. Digging a hole is losing. And that's why those of you who can see the screen, and I described this verbally last time, and is that loss simply means digging the hole. So chasing, you know, if you can, yeah, I guess you can see my little mark here. Chasing is simply the process of trying to convert losses into win. And remember that chasing is one of the diagnostic criteria and really one of the primary features that identifies somebody with a gambling problem. Do they have a pattern of chasing? So what happens is you dig a hole and you climb out, you dig a hole and you climb out, or not, or you fill in some of the hole, but the whole goal of gamblers, once they get into trouble, is simply to get even. It's not to get ahead in most cases, it's to get even. So I equate getting even with simply filling in the hole you dug. So this guy's sitting on my couch, and a little while ago, again, it was a spending problem, but same fantasy addiction as gambling as sex addiction. And I said, so in the past, when you would be in the hole and you would solve the problem or you would climb out, how did you feel? And his words were superior, which is interesting. Well, I've heard that many, many times before. So then what I did was I got my board and I drew a picture of the whole mountain. All right, so let's get this straight. So I drew the ground level line, drew the hole, right? And then drew up on the other side of that. Let me go this way with it. And I said, so the hole is you're in a crisis, and what you did was you solved the problem, which meant you got back to ground level, right? He said, yeah. I said, so how do you explain feeling superior just by filling in the hole that you dug? That's what I mean by the dissonance, right? how do you end up feeling superior? I can't point to it on this, but right here where it says win, how do you end up feeling superior? By simply filling in a hole you dug so that you can get back to ground level to watch people's feet as they're walking past you on the sidewalk. Now, I throw that in by way of saying not only are you not superior, but actually you're kind of an idiot. Yeah, I didn't use that term with him, but, you know, although I might. And so simply phrasing it that way has a way of interrupting that story that we're telling ourselves about how wonderful we are, that we dug a hole and we placed the next bed or did the next deal and simply filled in the hole. And yet what's fascinating is that is the experience of many people. There's a huge rush that comes from imagining getting out of the hole and then actually doing it. Well, you've got to ask yourself the question, why is that? So before we get to that, part of it is that the delta R is the rush. And by the way, the deeper the hole, the bigger the rush. Doesn't that just make sense? And the rush is the equivalent of, you know, in any sporting event, the most exciting sporting event is the come from behind victory, or the Hail Mary pass at the end of the game with no time left on the clock, or the home run in the bottom of the ninth of the seventh game of the World Series, or an extra innings or whatever, you know, the walk-off home run. Or the basket, you know, the guy who hits the basket with no time left on the clock, and in horse racing, the photo finish, whatever it happens to be. And so we know just the way we're wired that the biggest rush comes from being in the hole and climbing out. So what happens then is that we're bouncing between this winning and losing. So as over the years, as I worked with gamblers, I began to hear them tell these stories. One of them I told many times is about a woman that was in a treatment program that I ran the group, one of the first groups that we had, and she told me about the loss in a fire, in a house fire, of 3 family members. A father, a sister, and a brother. And this is a lot of years, many years early. And she was in legal trouble. That's because of her gambling. That's why she was in treatment. And as she told her story, she talked about always gambling at a casino where the dealer reminded her of her sister who died. She would always bet in multiples of 3s. That sort of thing. And you begin to listen to the story, and as it unfolded, it became clear to me that it was an extraordinary metaphor. Or the individual that I worked with in Chicago who was a Holocaust survivor. And I remember asking him one day, I can't remember exactly what the numbers were. I said, what were your, and this was a horse bet, I said, what were your favorite numbers or combinations that you bet on the horses? And I think his answer was something like 4s, 1s, and 2s. And I said, okay. I said, well, why 4s, 1s, and 2s? And he first said, well, you know, I don't know. I just like those numbers. I said, well, do those numbers have any significance to you? Now, I'm asking a question that I already know. People who are betting numbers, those numbers always have significance. And it's important that you ask what the significance of those numbers are. And 99 times out of 100, you'll strike gold with that. So I said 4s, 1s, and 2s. I said, what are the significance? 2 or 3 times. And then the third time I asked him, it looked like he'd been hit between the eyes with a sledgehammer. And I said, what? He said, oh my God. He said, my family escaped from the Nazis on April the 12th, 1942, when we escaped across the Alps. Now that's a story, as I say, it still sends chills up and down my spine. And yet you hear that kind of thing all the time. And so the more I heard that, the more I realized, it became very clear that a lot of people's gambling was both a reality but also a profound metaphor for trying to deal with loss. and this is, I don't know if it's especially true, but I find it consistently with the machine players that you all are working with. So the more we began to explore this and ask the question, the more it became, oh, and then there's the other story of the woman who put a picture of her dead son. He'd been killed in the military on the slot machine that she was playing down at a casino in southern Indiana. And the casino employees asked me during a training why that was true. And I said, well, so is that for good luck? Well, it might be, but I think it's something more than that. Because see, here's the thing. When you lose money and you place the next bet and you win it back, you've undone, literally, financially, the problem of the money that if you lose $100 and you place the next bet and you win it back, then you've literally undone the problem of losing $100, or people say, well, I broke even. So when you ask any gamblers, machine players, well, how did you do? Oh, I broke even. Well, what does that mean? Don't fall into the trap of deciding in your own head, in your own fantasy world, what that means. What do you mean you broke even? It could mean, and if you listen to the story, it could mean, well, I took $500 in with me, and I lost the $500, and I got it back, so I broke even. Well, not exactly. In financial terms, yeah, but the reality is you lost $500. And then you had to place the next bet in order to win. And do you all get that if I tell you that I broke even, what I'm doing is I'm linking events that are not linked. This is really important. Is that if I took $500 into the casino or the game room or wherever I'm playing the machine, and I lose $500, I've lost $500. If I happen to place the next bet or next bets and win, I won $500. At the end of the day, I might have broken even, but along the way, I lost a lot of money. And so if you simply leave it at I broke even, then you're not going to get anywhere with that. If you back up and have them tell you the story about that gambling experience, it will give you all kinds of information in order to have a conversation with them, to talk with them, and find out what their thought process was. But it's all about trying to deal with loss. So here's over at the right hand side of this diagram, is that if it's just gambling, I can place the next bet and win. But if there was a death, divorce, lost job, loss of health, whatever it happens to be, there are many losses in life that we simply cannot undo. But what I can do is step into an arena that is all about winning and losing, and metaphorically, I can place the next bet, I can win, and I can undo the problem of loss. And temporarily, that gives me a fix and somehow has mitigated the pain of the loss. However, it immediately comes back because the fact is I haven't done or undone anything. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes, sir. And I think what I was thinking was this concept that if I lose 500, then I win 500. My perceived, and I say I broke even, but using the terminology breaking even, I'm really perceiving it as a complete win.
I think that's right. Yeah, because I got back the money that I lost, and so then you get in. Well, when you get back the money that you lost, how did you feel? And
right.
And then you pay attention to how they're reporting that they felt. And it gives you all, it simply gives you all kinds of information that you can use. Because remember, our goal here is to help them tell their story. Mm-hmm. It may sound strange, but it's a story that they don't know. because they're not conscious, because you and I both know that once somebody sits down in that machine, it's kind of like they've hooked themselves up to an IV morphine drip and they're on autopilot. And so our job is to help them recover and tell themselves the story that they're not telling themselves along the way. And what my article of faith is, that if I can do a good enough job of helping you tell yourself the truth or your story, then your story is what intervenes on you, not me. It's your story, which is another way of saying what we've talked about before, is your truth confronts your lie. And to the degree that I'm successful in helping you tell yourself the whole story, then I'm doing good work. And then I just kind of get out of the way and say, okay, it's your life. And my position is, it's not my business whether or not you gamble. And it's not my job to do a damn thing to get you to stop gambling. All right, now think about what I'm saying. Now, recognize it may be a little, I don't know if it's controversial or not. It's not my job to get you to do you different at all. I believe that it is my job to help you become conscious of how you do you, to wake up, which is another term. And I think I'm on firm ground because what does the Buddha say? Wake up or be awake? Jesus says stay awake. All the traditions, all the spiritual traditions talk about going from being asleep to awake, or from going from unconscious to conscious. And so if we know that that's the wisdom over thousands of years, it seems like that we as clinicians ought to appropriate that and utilize that for the benefit of the people we're working with. I will tell you that your need, there's a little soapboxy stuff. Let me talk about myself here too. Our need for somebody to be well gets in the way of us helping them be well. I have a guy right now that I'm working with. He's in Chicago. I've met with him personally, but also we do a lot of work by phone, who was many years Mr. AA in the area. And lately he's been on a crack binge, and he knows, and he's a recovering heroin addict, and he knows enough to know that he can't stop, but he wants to go find a 10-day or a 14-day place to kind of dry out, or to get his head on straight. And I'm thinking it might take you a little bit more than 14 days. We got somebody, some background knowledge. It seems like water or something like that coming through. Hang on just a second. I'm going to look at this. Okay. So this gets into a little bit of the philosophy. What I want you guys to be aware of is and this is just for us to be conscious, because what we're asking of the people we're working with, we can't ask them to go any place that we ourselves are not willing to go. And so I have to be aware of myself as I'm working with you. What do I want? Well, I want you to be well. I want you to be happy. I want you to use the language, I want you to be happy, joyous, and free. And I want the best for you. I want you to be free to live into the fullness of life. I want you to be free to walk through all of life, which means the challenges, the pain, the losses, the struggles. I want you to do that, but I want you to do that consciously. All right, so that's what I want for you, but I have to pay attention and know whether or not what I want for you gets in the way of me helping you get there, if that makes sense to you guys. In the old days, I used to spend a lot of energy trying to get somebody to stop gambling. and didn't work too well. Sometimes it did, probably, but mostly it didn't work too well. And these days, my posture is, it's not my job to get you to do anything different, but I do take on the burden of responsibility of doing everything I can to help you move through your life awake as opposed to asleep. And so that's why I say that part of my job is to get inside of your head and rattle around. And if you're not going to stop gambling, then I hope that I can damn sure screw it up. No, I don't want you, this kid's going to go back to the card rooms. I want to make sure that he doesn't go back to the card rooms without having one eye at least a little bit wider open about his choices and his actions than he did before he saw me. And if I've done that, then I believe I've been successful. All right, let me pause there and see if anybody's got any thoughts, feedback, response to that.
You got anything to say?
Yeah, so I think sometimes we say it's not our job to keep you from gambling, but we can pretty much guarantee that you're going to enjoy it less.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, one of the things I find I hear my clients tell me a lot is that they accuse me a lot of making them think about gambling a lot more. And then I just say, well, look at the reality of it. When you're in your autopilot mode, you're not even thinking about the gambling. It's just natural. And now that you're mindful of it, now it's not as fun, is it? And then they kind of get that aha moment in that particular setting. But in the beginning, it's like, oh, well, you talking to me all the time about gambling just makes me want to gamble that much more. And I'm like, no, that desire's been at that level.
Wait, you said they accuse you of getting them to think about gambling more?
Yeah, because before when they're in that autopilot mode, so it's just kind of reframing that for them to say, you've always been thinking about the gambling on that level prior. It's right. Just that with being in that autopilot mode, you're not really mindful of how much you're thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. What's interesting, and I'm responding to literally to what you said, is it's interesting in how you presented that. You said my clients are telling me that kind of like it's my fault that they're thinking about gambling more.
Yeah, they're deflecting that back on me because supposedly now it's my issue.
Well, not only that, but also that, I mean, to me, and just the language, and I believe exactly what you're saying is, but literally what they're doing is abdicating responsibility. Just in that declaration to you, if we literally listen to the language that you use, is they're abdicating responsibility, correct?
Correct.
In other words, who's doing their thinking? You or them?
They're trying to make me think that I'm causing them to think that way, but.
That's right. Okay, so do you address that piece of it?
I do.
Okay, good, because I think that's critical, and that goes to what I'm reminded of is one of my favorite passages. This is the combo book, and since you're bringing that up, Trent, in here, this is on page 10 of the combo book. And page 10 says, what are some of the characteristics of a person who is a compulsive gambler? And then let me jump down to number 3. Number 3 says a desire to have all the good things in life without any effort on their part seems to be the common pattern of compulsive gamblers. All right, so no effort on my part. So if we know that that's true, and that's true of action escape gamblers, I don't care who it is. In other words, the way that I'm going to get all this wonderful stuff is by getting lucky. It's not from the fruit of my own labor, right? Whether you're just looking to get away from everything and go to the casino and veg out, there's that effect of I'm getting something for nothing. No effort on my part. Many Gamblers Anonymous members accept the fact they were unwilling to grow up. Okay, and here's the line. Subconsciously, clearly means I'm not fully conscious of this. Subconsciously, they felt they could avoid mature responsibility by wagering on the spin of a wheel or the turn of a card, and we could add into that playing the machines. And so the struggle to escape responsibility finally became a subconscious obsession. That is such a powerful line, and it's one of those that that we want to always listen for the language of abdication of responsibility that you will hear over and over and over again from the people that you work with. So literally, let's break that down because it's helpful to do that. Subconsciously, they felt. Subconsciously means I'm not fully conscious. I could avoid mature responsibility, which is taking ownership of myself. How? By wagering, by handing over or abdicating responsibility over to the outcome of a wager in whatever form. And so the struggle to escape, we're only going to struggle to escape if we feel imprisoned, right? So I'm fighting to escape that which has me bound. Well, what has me bound here? Escape responsibility. And so I'm perceiving responsibility as a source of imprisonment that I am struggling to escape from, and it is a subconscious obsession, right? That's how powerful this dynamic is. So we hear it all the time. Somebody will say, well, you know, that this happened or that happened. The guy who I testified for early on, you know, after I did the valuation and I started working with him more as a clinician, he would say, when the robberies occurred, that's an example of that dissociative language and the language of abdication of responsibility. When your client says to you, you know, you're making me think about gambling more. You know, what I want to know is really how am I doing that? I could say, well, actually, I'm not doing that. You're doing that, which would be a true statement. And it's real tempting to do that. But what we want to do is step back. And what's interesting, I want you to listen to that response, is at that point, I'm not going up against directly their assertion that I'm the one who's responsible for them thinking about gambling more. I'm going with it, ironically, but I want them to explain, how am I doing that? And in the process of asking them how am I making you think more about gambling? Well, you're asking me questions, or you're asking me questions that get me to think. And this might be a conversation. Well, get who to think? Well, me. You mean you? Okay, because I'm confused about who's doing your thinking for you, right? Because initially you said that I'm making you think, and I'm just curious how I'm doing that. See, so you spend some time playing around with that, and where I want them to get to and where they need to be is taking ownership for their own thoughts, saying basically, because you're asking me these questions, you are inviting me or asking me to think about what I'm thinking about, and I'm doing more of that. Okay, so again, who is thinking more about who's thinking? Well, I am. Okay. And see, if we get there, then at that level, then our work is done. Does that make sense? Trent, that's a beautiful example. And I'm guessing that's part of what you're doing with this person. Yes?
Yes, I have a couple of them that bring that up occasionally.
Yeah, yeah. And those are those clinically, those are those gifts that somebody lays out to us that's in the context of, it's making a comment in the context of a relationship, and it's an extraordinary opportunity to intervene with that person at a fundamental primary level. And the reason I read that passage, Trent, on the basis of what you're saying, is that is such a pervasive In fact, it's not there. It's there everywhere, all over the place. And all we got to do is listen for it. And when we hear it, it's an opportunity to invite them. That's a great example of how we invite people to tell them the truth about themselves. Thanks for throwing that in, because it really is clarifying. Any other thoughts on that? All right, what else? We got a few more minutes. Anybody?
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between responsibility, progress, and success?
Yeah.
Now, it seems like when we probably should increase treatment at times, we reduce treatment, reduce episodes, reduce involvement. When the client starts to make progress, well, you don't have to come see me twice a week. You can come see me once a week. And yet they respond to success, respond to responsibility, progress as if they were allergic to it. And I believe you said one time that I do so well, they just can't stand it. That would be the gambler speak.
A couple thoughts. I tell you, in listening to you ask that, I had a couple thoughts. Isn't it interesting that what I'm saying to you is when you're in a crisis, I'm going to give you a lot more attention than when you're not. And I know there's validity to that. I'm not saying that there's not. I just thought that was interesting, because I think the bigger challenge is for addicts is how do you figure out how to do life clean and sober? I think that's the greater challenge. I think I told you guys this last time. I see a guy here in Austin who's actually I just saw him today. Somebody that I go and sit and visit with, and somebody that I pay who gets to listen to me and give me some feedback. And I said to him when I first started seeing him months ago, he's a retired Episcopal priest, and he's a Jungian analyst, and has been around the block a number of times. And so he's somebody that he and I work well together. I trust him to give me some really accurate feedback. I receive some gifts from him every time I meet with him. But when I went in to see him, he kind of said, I'm putting this in shorthand for you guys, but he kind of said, why are you here? I said, well, I said, here's my primary problem. My primary problem is that I don't have a problem. I mean, I got problems. I proceeded to kind of fill him in on the last, 30 years of my journey through the depths, and, through the psychiatric hospitals and the suicide wards and bankruptcy court, and all that stuff that's been a lifetime ago for me. And I said, I've spent so much of my life living with and in crisis, and knowing really well how to manage that and how to work with other people in crisis. I'm really good at that because I've, done it myself. I said, but I don't have a crisis in my life, and that's why I say I don't have a problem. And I'm not sure so the question is, so now what? And he and I both started laughing. And so I don't know if that's even addressing. I don't know why I thought about that, Dick, but I think the relevance is what about the addicts who are not in a crisis, who need help learning how to do life? Was it the AA language, life on life's terms, or just how to do life without running from it, that presents a whole new challenge. And to me, that's the exciting journey. My hope is that some of you get to work with people who are not in the depths of their addiction, but who say, I want to grow. I want to learn how to do my life different. My hope is that you all get to, even if it's just one person in your caseload or one person in your life, because as you all know, that's a whole different kind of energy. Dick, I don't know if I'm responding to your question at all, or kind of tangentially.
That's it. No, that really is it. I have a caseload of one, and people often say, how come you're still working with this guy? I said, because the sky's the limit. You know, this guy wants to do more than just, and he comes to me to report in and looks at me as some kind of beacon, I suppose. I don't know, but I'm important in his life. I know that, and I don't want to go away from that. And I don't measure his progress in terms of days absence or any of that anymore. But he has taken it to a different level. And I'm kind of a witness to that, if you will.
Yeah, and he's a gift to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you learn just as much from that as you give too, you know. So.
Oh, without a doubt. You know, that reminds me, one of the other things that happened just actually on Sunday, there's a guy who I worked with on and off for probably the last 25 years from Chicago. This guy was a big sports bettor and with numbers that are just outrageous, literally into the millions of dollars that he lost. And he'd come in and see me when he'd get really jammed up, and then he'd leave. And, you know, I knew he wasn't ready, but always let him know, hey, man, here's where I am. You can trust me to do the best job that I can, to hold up a mirror, and that I'm there for you. You know, when and wherever and however you're ready, knowing that he got a lot of bailouts, always was getting bailouts along the way. Well, he's got over 2 years clean and sober now for the first time since he's been 16 years old, and he's in his early 50s. Starting a business. So he came into Austin for a conference. He called me before he got here, said, man, I'm going to be in town. He said, you know, can we meet? Can we meet? And so I met him on Sunday. Went to the hotel where he was for about 45 minutes. He was in a business meeting. And he'd said this to me over the phone, but, we talked about kind of where he was and that sort of thing. He said, I just wanted to tell you to your face. He said, I want you to know that you saved my life. And I've heard that before, but I've also said that to people. Mm-hmm. And then he looked at me, he says, how does that feel? For you to hear that. And I don't know that anybody's asked me that before, but I had some tears, and I said, first of all, I feel a tremendous amount of joy that I got to be here for you, and that you have made a decision to do your life very different, and that I get to be a witness to that. And I said, so I'll take that. However, what I also want you to know is that in addition to you thanking me for saving your life, you guys also got to thank the people that were there for me that saved my life, so I could be there for you to save your life, so that you get to be there to save somebody else's life down the line that will come in the right time if you're open to it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're talking about, Dick. And that's one of the cool things about what we get to do, is that we get to be a witness every now and then to transformation. Did I save his life? No, I got to play a role in that, and I know that, but I'm not going to argue about that, because I don't want to take that. He's given me a gift. I don't want to take that away from him, but I know exactly what he means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's the gift, and that's kind of what, there's times where I got people on the schedule and I'm thinking, oh, I'd rather be not fishing, because I don't like fishing, but I'd rather be doing something else, but inevitably something happens. And so that's the gift, just kind of, it's a great kind of note to end on. The gift of what we get to do is we get to be a small, medium, big, whatever part of somebody else's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we put ourselves in a position to be used, I believe, by a power greater than us for the healing of someone else, knowing that it doesn't stop with that person, that we impact by our lives many, many people. And so each one of you has chosen a profession where intentionally you get to do that. And every now and then there'll be somebody who will really let us be a part of their life in that way. And sometimes I believe that I'm the one who gets the bigger gift of that. So there you go. Any final thoughts before we sign off until next month?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's a good affirmation to end on. All right. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and we'll reconvene the second Tuesday in December. And like usual, send me any text, emails, questions, that sort of thing that we can use to spend this time to help us all learn some more. Adios.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.